This course is your ultimate guide to mastering the world of role-based authentication in Next.js using Auth.js. This course provides you with the most up-to-date coverage on the latest features in Next.js, guiding you through the implementation of authentication on both server-rendered and client-rendered pages. And it shows you how to leverage out-of-the-box OAuth providers like Google and GitHub, as well as creating your own custom authentication provider using MongoDB. Jacob Lower teaches this course. He is a popular instructor on topics related to Next.js. Let's start learning.
What is up, Free Code Camp? It's Jake Lower again, here to show you another Next.js video. In this one, we're going to cover authentication. We're going to show you simply how to put authentication in your Next.js application. So we're going to spin up a blank application, and then we're going to spin up authentication immediately in that application. We're going to use built-in OAuth providers of Auth.js, like GitHub and Google that we all use. And then in the end, we're also going to show you how to roll your own login system using MongoDB. We're going to also investigate role-based authentication as well. So you'll be able to give admin roles and different things like that. We're going to cover how you can secure server-side pages as well as client-side pages to cover all your authentication needs in this one video. If you like these type of videos, they come out on my channel first, Clarity Coders. Check that out as well as our website, claritycoders.com. Let's not waste any more time and jump right in.
All right, so here we are in Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to do a lot of setup. You can watch one of my other videos for exactly how you can get some of this installed. Make sure you have Node.js. Have some familiarization with Next.js projects would probably be helpful. I also use a couple extensions that'll show really quick. This ES7 plus React Redux code snippets. It's very useful. I'm going to use it a lot in this video, so you can go ahead and download that. Prettier as well for formatting code. You can see the others in here that I use. Feel free to freeze and install those if you would like. Let's go ahead and spin up this project. So I'm going to open up a new terminal. You can code along with me. I really feel that's the best way to learn, so that's how I like to do these tutorials. And let's do npx create next app. We'll go ahead and click yes to proceed. We can call this project our NextAuth tutorial or whatever you would like. I'm not going to use TypeScript, so you're able to convert this to TypeScript if you'd like. I'm going to select no. I would recommend if you're following along to do the same. I'm going to use ESLint, Tailwind, yes. Source directory, I'm going to say no. App router, yes. And would you like to customize the default alias? No. So we'll let that spin up this project, and then we should have some boilerplate to work with. Great. So now we have our project spun up. You can see where it created the project file. I want you to go ahead and open up that folder, and then we'll continue on from there. So if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can do File, Open Folder, and then pop open that window, and you should end up with something that looks like this. So now we have our project folder open. I'm going to do one more install here. So I've opened up another terminal. Let's go ahead and install NextAuth because we're obviously going to use that. So we'll do npm I next-auth. And then let's take a quick look at our package.json. Here you can see my exact dependencies. You can copy these if you want them to work perfectly. So you can see I'm using 13.5.4. Any version above this should be okay. If not, try installing with this exact version, and that could help. Same with NextAuth. Now let's get to cutting down this app a little bit. Let's expand the app folder. Let's go out to our global CSS. Let's delete all of this in here. And then I will save. We only really are going to use two things. Let's go ahead and set it up just so we're done with it. So we'll do @layer base. Bam. We can do an H1, which we're going to use just to make things look a little more like we're used to. We'll do font bold, text -3XL, just for the correct text sizing, just so it looks a little better. Then we'll also do an A tag. And we'll do @apply. Let's do underline and font bold. And again, this will just help kind of visualize what we're doing as we're doing it. Nothing too crazy here. And then let's open up our page. I'm going to go ahead and Control A and just delete all this out. And this is where my extension is going to come in handy. I'm going to do RAFCE a lot. That's that code snippet one that I showed you. And then Control-Shift-L, and this can just be our home page. So I'm going to change all these at once. Nothing crazy here. And we can close that. Close our styles. We should be actually done with those, honestly. Let's rename this to page.jsx, just so it's consistent there. And then let's create all of our other pages for our application. I'm going to showcase some different types of authentication on some different types of pages, so that's why we have multiple. So let's do new folder here. We are going to have a member page. So this is a private protected page for only people who have signed up. So we'll do a member folder and then a new file in here that we'll call page.jsx. And then on that member page, we can do RAFCE, just like before, Control-Shift-L, and we will do member. And then let's add in H1 tags here. And this is going to be our member server session. So remember, if we don't add use client up above our import statements, it's going to render the page on the server side. So this is going to show you how we can protect a server side page on our application. So let's create a new folder, and then as you probably could guess, we're going to do a client member page. So let's create a client member folder, and then I'm just going to copy this page, paste it in here. We'll close this one out to make sure that we're using the right one. And then you'll see this is our client member page. So let's use a member client session for this one. And then, of course, to ensure that this is rendered on the client side, we have to explicitly tell that we want to use the client side. So I'm showing you this. This shouldn't be your default. You should never just default to rendering a page on the client side, but there are certainly occasions where you'll have to. So this is our example of that. We are also going to have a denied page. So most of the time, we're going to route people to a login if they haven't authenticated. But what if they have authenticated and they just don't have permissions in role-based authentication? In that scenario, we're going to direct them towards a denied page. So let's just create another folder at that application level for denied. We'll create a new page.jsx inside of this. Here we can do RAFCE. Control-Shift-L, we'll do denied. We'll use H1 tags for this. Again, just because, make it look a little better there. And then we will do a tiny bit of styling. Now this is a stretch when we're calling this styling, but let's say text-red-400. So this will just be a red denied that we send people to if they don't have the correct authentication for our page. And then let's do one other. So this is going to be eventually our page that's protected by roles. So only an admin eventually will be able to go to this page. So let's create a create user folder. And then inside of that, let's create a new file called page.jsx, and then RAFCE, Control-Shift-L, and we will call this create user. We'll say only admins. Now, this is eventually. It's not going to work like that out of the gate, but we have our structure in place. I think that's most of the pages that we're going to need in this project as well. So we should be good there. Let's create another folder. So let's say new folder. We're going to use open parenthesis and then components. Components, like that. And then new file. Let's do our navigation.jsx. I'm going to use a capital N with this. This will just be our navigation bar up top that we can get set up now. We can do our normal RAFCE. That all looks pretty good. Now, instead of here, we're going to do a little more coding this time to get this set up, and then we should be good to go. Let's do a header. Let's also do nav tags. So for our header, let's do class name. We're going to do almost no styling, but BG gray 600 and then text gray 100. Should be good. And then on the nav side, let's do class name is flex justify between items center. Width is full. Let's do a px of 10. And finally a py of 4. That should be good. Let's close out of this terminal window for now, just so it's a little less distracting. And we'll go inside our nav tags here. So for the first div, let's just do my site. And then for the second div, and our only other component in here, let's do a class name of flex, gap of 10. That should be good. Then we're going to add in some links. Make sure you're doing the import as well. So I'm going to tab complete here, and that should do the import. You'll see that it did import link from next link. We need an href for this, so we already created our home page. It's at /. We can call this home. Let's copy this. So we got home, we got create user, member only, client. Let's do a public page. So we got home, then next, let's do our create user page. Now remember, eventually, this will only be for admins. So we'll do create user. Let's do our client member page. So again, this should be protected. You have to be logged in. You don't have to be an admin. Let's do our member page. This is almost the exact same thing, except it's rendered on the server instead of on the client side. And then let's do a public page, which is completely unprotected. We'll do public here. That looks pretty good. Now we can go ahead and go into our layout.js. We're almost ready to get into Next.js. This is the last tiny bit of setup here. So let's delete out the Google fonts. We don't care about that. We don't care about that. And then make sure you kill the reference to the Google fonts as well. Should be good and cleaned up. You can change this if you would like. We're not worried about it here. We got our HTML. We got our body. Let's do a class name of BG gray 100. So this is just the background. Let's import our navigation. Let's do nav like that. Make sure you do the import here. So I'm going to tab. You'll see it imported our component from above. We can self-close. So / and then our greater than sign. And then let's just wrap this in a div as well. These children here, just so we can do one other tiny bit of formatting. Div, this class name. Let's do a margin of 2 on it. Should be good to go. Okay, so we did some coding. We got the structure set up. We're going to work in NextAuth next. Let's open our terminal. Just make sure this runs. Let's do npm run dev. We got no errors. That is a good sign. Let's check it out in the browser. We're going to go to localhost 3000. Dang, look at us, web development. Who says I can't style applications? This is beautiful. You can tell what page we're on by our little reference to that page. So you see we have a create user, client member, and our public page. We didn't do anything with the public page. Let's fix that up. And let's just check real quick. We should have a denied one as well. Yes, so we are all good there. Let's make a quick change to the public page just so we can reference that we're on it. Ooh, I didn't route to it at all, did I? Yeah, not found. I didn't create the public page. So new folder, let's do public. Inside here, new file, page.jsx, RAFCE, Control-Shift-L, let's do public, delete that out. Put our H1 tags, just like we did for the others. I didn't for the create user because we're going to do something else there. We're actually going to create users towards the latter half of this. Okay, so we should be all good. We got all of our pages. We don't have any authentication set up whatsoever, but we're going to get into that next. Let's go ahead and jump into that. So we know we need to create an API folder, and that's going to be what NextAuth looks for. So let's create API folder. Inside of that, we need to create another folder called Auth. Inside of that, so I'm right-clicking on Auth here, new folder. I'm going to use square brackets, and then inside of those square brackets, I'm going to do ... 3 dots, NextAuth. And then inside of this, you'll typically see one of two things. So you might have a route, well, you need to have a route.js, and you might have an options.js, which are going to lay out the options of your project. So we're going to follow that format. So let's create a new file, and let's do route.js. And then in the same folder, so inside that NextAuth folder, we're going to create options.js as well. Let's start with the route.js just so we don't forget. It is the simpler of the two because we're going to import in our options. So let's do an import. I'm going to close out my terminal just because it's distracting. Let's do import NextAuth tab autocomplete. You can see I'm getting next-auth/next. I don't know that I want that. Let's delete out the /next. Let's just do NextAuth from NextAuth. And let's do import options, plural, from /options. So this is going to import our file from our other directory. Let's do const handler equals NextAuth options. And then we're going to export handler as get, handler as post. Now this is straight from the NextAuth or Auth.js documentation, so we're just setting this up basically how they have it set up. I'm going to close out of these other tabs. I actually think we're done with route.js too. I'll close out of that. And now we can set up our options here. So this options file is going to be where you import and set up how you want people to be able to authenticate with your application. So we're going to start with 2. And these are built-in providers by NextAuth, so we don't have to do very much setup with them. So let's do import GitHub provider from next-auth/providers/GitHub. Let's copy that. Paste it below. Let's do, this is a capital G, Google provider. And we're going to do the same thing, except at the end, it's going to be Google as well. Then let's do export const options equals providers, colon, square brackets. So here we can add an array of the different providers that we would like to use. In our case, we want to use the GitHub provider, parentheses, curly brackets. And then inside of here, we can set up anything that we would like for our GitHub. So we can add extra roles, we can add extra features, or we can leave it as plain Jane as we want and just ship it that way. But we are going to show you how you can add roles as well while we're doing this. So let's go ahead and add in a profile, and we're going to be passed a profile back or we're going to get a profile back. Then we can do curly brackets, and inside of here we can add extra logic. So let's say console.log. Let's log out our profile. Let's make sure we know what it is too. So we can say profile of GitHub. And then we can log that. Now we want to add extra stuff to our session. So one thing that we can do, we can add extra logic that allows us to give specific roles to specific users. Now, my user that we can use in this that I'm going to sign up for the application with is jake@claritycoders.com. That's my real email. You can email me if you'd like. And it's going to have a special role. Everybody else's role is going to be GitHub user. So let's do let user role equal GitHub user. So this is going to be the role for everybody but me. But I'm going to say if my profile exists and it has an email, and that email is equal to jake@claritycoders.com. And you want to use your email here, an email that you can actually test this at your current location to give yourself admin rights to our test application. So sub in your email here. So if our email equals jake@claritycoders.com or whatever your email is, then our user role is going to be upgraded to admin. Then we will return our new profile. We're going to do ... So everything that was in the profile before, we want to still be in the profile. However, we want a new role of our user role. And that's it. You see, I controlled S there. It got the formatting all right. Thank you, Prettier. This is our GitHub provider. So let's copy this. We're copying everything on the GitHub provider. And let's paste it below. And then let's set up our Google provider. So for this one, we're going to handle things pretty close to the same. The only thing, we don't want any extra logic. So let's change this and let's say this is our Google profile. And you don't have to log these out. This is just so you can see what's on them and that sort of thing. So we're going to console.log that out. No special roles for this. And one small change with the Google profile. We need an ID field and the Google profile does not provide one. So let's set our ID equal to profile.sub. This is going to be the ID that they pass back. Make sure to add a comma after this as well. So we should be set up there as well. Now for each of these, we have to have a client ID and a client secret that we're going to set up with these providers so we can utilize them in our application. So on the level of the profile here, after that profile, we're going to hit enter here. And for our GitHub one, we're going to have a client ID : and we're going to set it equal to process.env.github_ID. Let's copy this. Now these are environmental variables that we're going to set up that are not set up yet. So this is going to be our client secret. And this will be GitHub_secret. Make sure to put commas after these. And then we can copy them. And down here on the Google one, so we're after the profile. We're going to add these in here, except this will be a Google ID and a Google secret. Perfect. So now these are set up. That is looking good. And we're going to make one more change out of the box here to ensure that we have our role available for us in this application. We're going to set up some custom callbacks. And this will essentially add our role to the token so we can utilize it in our programs. So notice I'm after the square bracket comma. I'm going to enter some callbacks here. We're going to do async JWT, parentheses, curly brackets. We're going to get a token and we're going to get a user. And from that, we can say if we have a user, let's say the token.role is equal to the user.role. So this will allow us to add that token, add that role onto our token so we can utilize it on the server side. However, we also want to be able to utilize this on the client side as well. So we will do async session. And here we can use session and our token. And here we're going to essentially do the same thing. We're going to say if we have a session.user. Let's set session.user.role equal to token.role. And this will allow us to use it there. Then, of course, we need to return our session. So we have it. And then up here, as I have forgotten, let's also return our token. And of course, comma here. Awesome. So now we should have this set up. So we got our providers set up. We got our sessions set up. Everything looks great there. Now we need to set up our provider on the provider side. So let's create a new file, and this is going to be at the base level. So it should be at the same level as your Tailwind config or the README or whatever. Let's set up a new file. Let's do .env.local. In here, we can set up our environmental variables. So remember, they're going to look like this. We want to utilize the same verbiage here. So let's do Google ID, Google secret, like that. And these are going to have equals afterwards. We're also going to need a GitHub ID and a GitHub secret as well. So we're going to set both of these up now. All right, so now if you are logged into your GitHub account, you can go to github.com/settings/apps. From here, we're going to select OAuth apps, and then we can create a new OAuth app. We can name it whatever we would like, so we can do NextAuth video tutorial. We can set up a homepage for it. So we're going to do http://localhost:3000. And then we also need to utilize a callback URL. So we're going to copy that, paste it down below here. It's going to be 3000/API/auth/callback/GitHub. You need to type it exactly like I did here, and then we can register our application. Now from here, we're going to get a client ID and a client secret. Ensure that you do not use mine. That won't work. And make sure you don't have anything weird, any spaces or whatever. So we're going to copy this client ID. And remember, this is GitHub. Don't get them confused. So we're going to do our client ID there. And then let's generate a new client secret. You might have to authenticate. I'm going to copy that secret and then paste that as well. So we now have our GitHub provider set up. That's really it. It's relatively easy. And then we're going to do the same thing on the Google side of things. So you're going to go to Google's developer console. So it's console.developers.google.com. And then from here, we can go to credentials. And we can create credentials. And we're going to do an OAuth client ID. We can say web application. I don't know if it really matters. We'll do a NextAuth video tutorial. Don't miss this. So we need an authorized redirect URI. Let's add that. As you can guess, it is http://localhost:3000/API/auth/callback/Google. API auth callback Google. Let's go ahead and create. So here you can see our client ID and our client secret. Let's go ahead and grab those. So let's grab our client ID. Paste that in. And let's do the same with the secret. So we'll grab that and paste that in as well. Awesome. So we should be all set up to authenticate with our application with whatever user we would like. However, we don't currently have any authentication set up on the individual pages, so we don't really have a way of knowing if we're authenticated or not, and we also don't have a way to log into our application yet. So let's go ahead and set that up first. So inside of nav.js, we want to add the login, logout components. Remember, this page right now is being rendered on the server side because we're not explicitly saying to render it on the client. So we're going to import get server session down here, tab complete from NextAuth. And then we can utilize that to see if we have an ongoing session right now at the moment. So what we can do is right in here, we can say const session equals await get server session. And then we need to pass in our options. So you'll see I'm going to autocomplete here, but these are inside our API, auth, blah, 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 that whole directory. You can see it imported correctly. And it's mad because I'm using an async function. So I, up here, need to add a sync. Perfect. So now we should have a session if we have a session, which we don't right now because we haven't logged in. So after the public page, let's add curly brackets and let's check to see if we have a session. So if we have a session, we want to add in a link. And we want the href to equal, and this is going to be our log out functionality. Remember, if we have a session, we're logged in. Let's do /API/auth/signout. And I'm going to add this. So I'm going to add question mark, callback, capital URL, a capital U, and then lowercase rl, equals /. So this means when we sign out, it's automatically going to send us back to the root of our directory. Let's close that link tag and we can call this log out. Now we're doing conditional rendering here, so it's only going to render this again if we have a session. So now we need to handle if we don't have a session, which is what we currently have. So let's do colon, and then let's paste this in. I'll save it so it wraps and you guys can see a little better. So if we don't have a session, then we want to be able to log in. So we're going to go to the same page. We're going to go to API/auth/sign-in this time. So now we should be able to tell if we have a session because we'll either have a log in or a log out button. We should not have both, hopefully. So let's go ahead and check this out. So now back on our site. So we have our site here loaded up. You'll see we do have a log in button. We do not have a log out button, which makes sense, right? Because we do not currently have a session. Let's hit log in. You'll see we get this nice built-in. Now you can customize this. That's not what we're going to cover in this tutorial, but you can customize this. But you see we got our two providers that we're able to log in with. Now remember, if I log in with GitHub, I am authenticated with my Jake at Clarity Coders, so that's going to be assigned an admin. The other one will be a normal session. It won't be my admin session. So let's authenticate with GitHub. You're going to have to authorize the first time you do it, and you'll get redirected back to your application. If this didn't happen correctly, double check that you added that callback URL correctly to GitHub. And likewise, when you test it with Google, the same way there. You're going to have to make sure that you have a valid session there as well. So now you'll notice that I did log in. That did work correctly, but I still have my login option. So it's not showcasing a session at the moment. So we did have the terminal still open. You can see what our issue is. It's throwing all kinds of errors. So what it's saying here, more or less, is that we haven't provided a token for our session. So we have no secret in order to verify that this person is correctly signed in with our application and they didn't just create some bogus session themselves. So what we need to do is inside our .env.local, we need to add a NextAuth secret here. So this is going to be called, all capitals, let's do NextAuth_secret. And we will set this equal to, and then we're going to create one. Now you can type in random characters here, and that would be fine, but we want to make sure that we have a certain level of security here. So open up your terminal. If you don't, you can kill your session if you were running it still from before. And let's generate that secret. So let's do open SSL rand base 64, and we want 32. And then here you can see we generated a nice little secret. Don't use mine, just create your own. And then we have our NextAuth secret here. So we should be good. Now, once you have that, we can go ahead and spin up our server again. So let's do npm run dev. So now back on our site, if you get any weirdness, make sure you're shutting down your server, turning it back on. You can also try reloading this page. And one other thing that I have to do from time to time when I'm playing around with cookies, sessions, and things like that, hit Control-Shift-I if you're on Chrome. And here you can go to the Application tab. And under local storage, session storage, and cookies, you can clear those out. And that will sometimes help if it's caching an error or anything like that that's happened in the past. I didn't have it this time, but just so you know, you can go through that process. Obviously, we don't have a session, right? Because we didn't have that NextAuth secret in here, so that errored out. So let's go ahead and try and log in again. You can do it with whatever provider you would like. I'm going to try with my GitHub again. And you'll see that now we have a log out. So we do have a session here, which is awesome. So if we go, we don't have any protected pages right now at the moment. So you can see our client member, our server session we can still get to. We can obviously still get to public. Let's go ahead and try and log out, sign out, and that goes back to the home directory and I have my login. So everything looks good, but nothing is protected. So let's get into protecting our routes. We're going to do this in 3 ways right now. So I'm going to quickly show you how to protect a server-side page, a client-side page, and then with our create user, we're going to protect it with middleware for right now, and then we'll expand that to protect it to make sure you're an admin on top. So let's go to, it's really not that difficult. Let's go to our member page first. Remember, this is our member server-side session. So let's take a look here and we can set up a session. So we're going to need to check to see if there is a session. So we need to make sure you're logged in. So session equals await get server session. We'll do the auto import. So I'm going to tab here and then I'm going to spit in our options. Remember, let's tab complete here. So it did those 2 imports for us. This also needs to be async. That looks great. Then below here, what happens if we don't have a session? So if we don't have a session, in this case, so if there is no session, then let's do a redirect and slide down. So let's use the one from Next Navigation. Make sure you're looking at the redirect from Next Navigation. We'll import that and we can redirect to /API/auth/sign-in question callback capital URL equals /member. So what this is going to do, it's going to redirect us to the login. It's going to leave the callback URL. So if they do log in, they'll come back to this member page. So that's going to be a nice look, nice and easy look. So below here, let's do just a little more. Let's add a p tag. And let's say inside of here, let's do curly brackets. So if we're here, we do have a session. So let's say session ?user email. So we'll spit out the email. Let's do that again. And this time, let's say role. So remember, inside of our options on all these, we're setting up a role of some sort. So for our Google provider, we are not setting up one. So that's going to cause an error. I'm going to minimize this. So here, we're setting up a user role on our GitHub side of GitHub user, unless you're me, Jake at Clarity Coders, and then you're going to get an admin role. On the Google one, we didn't, so luckily we didn't try to OAuth with that. If you did, I'm sorry. And we can paste in let user role, and let's say Google user. Paste that down there, and now this should be working as well. We'll test out Google just to make sure it works here down the road. But for right now, that should be good. And on the member page, we should be protected now. Let's try it. So let's go to our application. You see we can go to public. If we try to go to member, it asks us to log in. Now make sure you're not already logged in. In this case, let's do something different. Let's sign in with Google just to make sure that works, since I did just find out that it probably isn't for you guys. Pick a Google account, and you can see that our member session, it has my email address and Google user there as well. Great. So that works. Let's go to our client session. Now let's protect this. It's going to be a little different because this is rendered, the JavaScript is rendered on the client session on my client browser. So we can't use the server-side get that we were using before, and I'll show you why. Before we go there, I'm going to copy these two p tags. Let's go to our client member page. We can paste them below. So this will be if we have a session. Let's do get server session. So if we do that, you can see that we get all kinds of crazy errors. Well, part of it's probably because I use this. Let's control /. I'll just comment this out for right now. And then let's navigate to that page. We're going to create user, and then I'm going to go back to client member session. So now if we actually try to use get server session to get our session, so let's do const session equals await get server session. Pass in our options. You see we need to do an async function. So let's do async, and we save it. We can uncomment this. Save that. And let's go to our client member. And you'll see we get an error. Async await is not yet supported in client components. Okay, so we see our problem there. That's why we can't do it the same. So we can't do it in this format, which is fine. We have other options here. So instead of this, so let's do import use session. And we're going to do from NextAuth/React. So this is going to be how we grab our session. And then here, we can grab const. We're going to set data equal to session. We're going to do equals use session, parentheses, curly brackets, required equals true. And then on unauthenticated. So what do we want to do when we're unauthenticated? We want to redirect. Make sure you're using Next navigation again for your import. Redirect. And we're going to do something very similar to what we did on the other page. So we're going to do /API/auth/sign-in question callback capital URL equals /client member. Just like that. So we're good. And if we control save this, you'll notice that we're getting new errors, right? Use session must be wrapped in a session provider member. So this is a little complicated. So the use session needs a session provider. However, the session provider has to be a client component as well. So let's create a new file inside of our components, and we will call this AuthProvider.js. And this is going to use client. We are going to import session provider from NextAuth/React. So you'll see it did the auto import for me. And we're going to do const auth provider equals, we're going to pass in our children. Then inside of here, we're going to return our session provider. And don't worry, kids, putting you right back in there. We need to export default auth provider like that. So now we have our session provider in a client component, so we're good to go there. And we can go back to our layout page, and here's where we need to wrap this bad boy to get our session on the client side. Now remember, this is only if you need to do authentication on the client side. If you want to do it on server side, we're good already. So here, let's utilize our auth provider. This should be coming from /components directory. And then we're going to wrap this around our children div here. like so. Now I don't have to wrap my nav in it because I'm not using client side on that. You could certainly, it might even be better actually to wrap this around your entire body just in case. We can do that. I didn't need to for mine, but you might down the road. So we can wrap this auth provider, I believe, around the whole body like that, and that should function as well. And then if you have any client rendering here on the nav side, you can do that. Now again, shy away from client-side rendering if you can, but if you have to, you can go that route. So now we have an auth provider here. So our client member should have a session now, and you should need to be authenticated. So let's go back to this. Let's just go back to localhost. You'll see we got home. We are logged in. So if you go to the member, you can see that we're still my email, a Google user. If I go to client member now, you'll see it has the same. So both member, server session, and client session are the same. I'm both authenticated for them. Now if I log out and I go to client member, it is protected now. So that is good. Okay, what's middleware? So if we don't want to protect our pages inside of each page, we can set up middleware on our project, and that will allow us to add authentication rules in one spot that we can easily find. So let's create a new file. This is going to be on the same location as .env.local, and let's call it middleware.js. We can do export and then default. This is not what we're going to stick with, but we can do export default from NextAuth/middleware. So this right now will protect everything. So everything on our page will be protected. And then we can export const config equals, let's do a matcher. And then we can pass in an array of URLs that we want to test. And here we can protect create user. Okay. So right now we have it set up so our create user should be protected. Now you can see that's a lot easier than adding it on the page or anything like that. And if we go here, let's go ahead and log in just with my Gmail. So remember, I'm a regular user right now. Okay, now back to our application. Let's see if our create user is now protected. So you'll remember we're still logged in. So make sure you're authenticated. If you're not, you can tell because you have your printout here. Let's go to create user. And you'll see that I can get to it. Now, I'm not on my admin account, but we haven't done that yet. So it's just protected from normies. So let's go ahead and log out, sign out. And now we don't have any session. So if I go to member, it tries to log me in. If I go to create user now, it tries to log me in. So that is great. So we've successfully protected this with middleware. However, we still are not protecting it from normal users. We only want this to be admin. So let's make that change. Let's go ahead and log out. And then we'll go back to our code here. So we're going to do some new imports. So let's say with auth. I'll tab here. You can see my import that I'm going to get with auth above. And let's also do next response. And this is coming from next server. Now we should have all of our imports we need. Oh my gosh, I was on the wrong page. Don't do that. So let's leave our create user alone. If you had that open, I apologize. Let's close out of all of these. I don't make that mistake again. So we're back on our middleware page. So on our middleware page, we're going to do those same two imports that we just did. So we're going to do with auth and next response. So let's save that. And you can see that we got our two imports done. And then we're going to make some changes to this file. I'm going to leave the matcher on here because I only want this to apply to that page. I'm going to delete this out and start fresh. So I'm going to do export default with auth. Now inside of this, I want to create a function for my middleware. And I'm going to get a request when I visit a page. And we can console log out some information here that might help you with future requests or things that you want to do custom-wise. So let's console.log. Let's do our request.next URL.pathname. So this will show you what our path is. So if you're trying to do some logic here, that may help. And then let's also use, or at least log out, next request.nextauth.token.role. And that could help us do some troubleshooting as well. Now let's actually implement our logic. So remember, again, you can do any customization you want here, anything that makes sense with you, but this is what we're going to do to protect this one create user page and make it only admins. So let's say if in here we want to use our path name. So let's copy this. So we're going to say if request.pathname. So if we add other paths, it might not, might have different logic or whatever. So let's say if it starts with create user, and we want one other test here, and we want to make sure our role does not equal admin. Then let's do curly brackets. Let's save this just so it formats. I'll fix that. Okay, so here's our logic. Here's our if statement. So we want to say, if we're going to the create user page and you're not the admin, so if you're not the admin and you're trying to go there, let's just return next response dot rewrite. Let's do a new URL and we'll go to the denied page. Request.url. So what we're going to do is we're going to send them to that denied page we created earlier. Now we could send them to a login page, but they're already logged in. This is for if they don't have the correct role. So they probably shouldn't be able to just log into a different account. So if that is the case, we're going to send them to the denied page. If not, this will continue on and they will be authorized. So let's add a comma here. Let's do callbacks, colon, curly brackets. Let's say they are authorized if they have a token and that token is not null. So we want to make sure they have some sort of a token here. We actually need to wrap this in curly brackets as well, I believe. I'm going to highlight this, wrap it in curly brackets, and save. And you should have something that looks like this. So now we have our callback function set up. We have our middleware all set up, actually. So we should be good. So let's take a look. Let's go back to our project. We got all kinds of errors. Let's refresh. So currently, it does not look like we're logged in. Let's go ahead and log in with a non-admin account. So if we log in with our Google account, in my case, yours might be different. We go to member, you can see that our role is Google user. If we go to create user, you'll see that now we get a denied. Let's log back out. And this time I'm going to log in with GitHub. You'll see that I do have an admin session here, which is great. And if I go to create user, you can see that I do in fact get to the create user page. So we should be good there. So what we have now is we have OAuth provider set up for GitHub and Google, and we have role-based authentication for both server rendered pages and client rendered pages, as well as role-based authentication. So we are good there. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what if I have a database already, or what if I want to create a database of users that allows people to either use their email or pick a username and a password and set that up? That isn't covered in a lot of these tutorials because it's a little more advanced and you have to factor in things like validating email or whatever it might be, but I'm going to show you how you can set that up, connect it to a database relatively quickly, and get it at least spun up and in place. We are not going to cover validating emails, so you need to keep that in the back of your mind, that this is more like a username, not necessarily an email address. I can pick jake@gmail.com, even though that is not my email address. Let's go ahead and kill our terminal, and then we'll do the remaining imports for this project. So let's do npm I MongoDB, npm I Mongoose, and npm B crypt. Awesome. Now we got that set up. Let's go ahead and sign up for a MongoDB Atlas database. Now this is free. So if you haven't used it already, go ahead and sign up for a MongoDB Atlas account. You should come to a page like this. You can authenticate with very similar providers to what we're setting up. You can see how popular they are. So I'm going to go ahead and log into mine. Now, if this is your first time, you might get some pop-ups wanting to spin up a database right away, blah, blah, blah. You can skip all that. Hopefully, eventually, you'll come to a page like this. And what we want to do is up in at least right now, in the top left, is to create a new project. We're going to call this NextAuth video tutorial, in my case. I'm the project owner. Let's create our project. Then, once you get that created, we can create a deployment. So let's do create. You can do the free tier and then hit create. You're going to want to set up a username and password here. So on the next screen, it gives you an option to set up a username and password. Note these down. So inside your .env, you can note these down. I have admin and then a password below. So if I go back to my code, inside .env, let's just paste these in here for right now. Let's say admin and then our password. You'll want to add your current IP address as well. So we're going to add that. I forgot to hit create user. Make sure you hit create user. And then finish and close. Go to overview. And now you should have your database set up. So we're going to go ahead and hit connect. If you don't have this, there should be a connect button somewhere, or you might have to let provisioning finish. So once that's finished, you can hit connect. We're going to hit drivers, and then we're going to copy this string down here. Now back in our code, we're going to paste that string in here. Pretty long. You'll notice it already has admin. Switch that out for your username if you didn't use admin. I did, so I'm not going to change it. And then we're going to copy our password and paste in our password. Use your password, not mine, obviously. And then here, we're going to call this, in all caps, MongoDB _ URI. We're going to set that equal to this string. If we slide to the back, I'm going to delete this back half, so after the question mark, and I'm just going to call this appdb, like that. That should be it. So our env is set up there. That looks good. We can go ahead and close out of that. Now let's create a new folder. So in parentheses, we're going to say models. Inside of here, we're going to create a new file called capital U user.js. So we're going to define what a user looks like in our system. So we're going to import Mongoose and curly brackets schema from Mongoose. And we're going to use mongoose.connect process.env.mongodb _ URI. Mongoose.promise with a capital P equals global.promise. Then let's do const user schema equals new schema. Do curly brackets. So let's just have a name, and that's a string, an email, and that's a string, a password. You guessed it, that's a string. After this curly bracket, let's do parentheses. This is something I always do with my Mongoose models. Let's do timestamps equals true. This handles the created at and updated at dates, so it's there for you if you ever need it. And then let's create our user model. So const user equals mongoose.models.user, or, so this is if it's already defined, or we use mongoose.model and create the user from our user schema. Then let's export that. So export default user. Spell default correct. That looks good. Okay, so we got our model, we got our database set up. Now all we need to do is create our API for creating a user, and then I'll show you how you can verify against your existing users as well. So all we have left to do is to create the front end form that can submit a new user. Then we'll create the API to add a user to our database when someone submits the form. And then we'll add the credentials provider and show you how to validate that password. Let's create our user form. Now this is a little unique because we want this form to use client-side rendering because a form interacts with the user, with the JavaScript. So you might have validation on the front end or whatever it might be. User form.jsx inside of our components directory. And then on this user form, we are going to use client. We're going to import use router from Next navigation, not Next router. This mixes me up sometimes. So let's change that to navigation. And we're going to import React and use state from React. Const user form equals, we create our function like that. And then at the bottom, we'll export. I didn't use my short keys. I wondered what was weird about this. Export user form. See, I can do it, guys. All right. Then inside this, we are going to have a const router equals use router. We have a const form data. This is where we're going to store all of our form data. And we'll have a set form data. And we'll set that equal to use state with curly brackets inside. So our form data is just going to be an empty object originally. Then we'll do const error message. So we're not going to do much here, but I will check to see if that that email is already in our database, and then we can send a duplicate user type of error response back. So we have an error message and a set error message equals use state. This will just be a blank string to start out. That makes sense. We need to handle our change in our form. And if you've done this before, it's pretty straightforward. We're coding it, so it's pretty dynamic. Doesn't really matter what our form values are. I always do const value equals e.target.value. Copy that, and I'll do const name equals e.target.name. And then I will do set form data. I'm going to pass in the previous state. We want another set of parentheses there, and then open curly brackets. That looks better. So when we change our state, so this is anytime the state changes, we're going to say previous state. We're going to expand that. So it's going to take everything from the previous state before, and we're only going to overwrite the one change that we're making. So whatever field on our form we're changing and whatever value we're setting it to, we're going to override it with. And that's our handle change. That's it. Now from here, we can do a const handle submit. This equals an async function. We're going to do e.prevent default. We're going to reset our error message. So if we previously had a error message, we're going to set it back to blank at the start of submitting our form, basically starting with a clean slate. We're going to get a response from our own API that we haven't created yet. So we're going to do const response equals await fetch. Then we're going to do API/users with a capital U. Remember, we're creating this in just a moment. Parentheses. Nope, sorry, comma, and then curly brackets. We'll do our method equals post. We're going to create a new user. Our body is going to equal json.stringify. We're going to pass in the form data, just like that. We'll do content type, and that equals application/JSON. Okay, almost done, believe it or not. So we're going to check to see if our response has an error. So if our response does not equal OK, then we want to get what the actual error was. We're going to pass back an error here. So we'll wait our response.json, and then we will set error message to whatever was in our response.message. And we'll show you how we're going to set that in just a moment. So we're going to pass back some sort of an error. We're going to catch it here, and then we're going to set our error message. This is only for an error, remember. We'll add an else. So otherwise, we want to do router.refresh and router.push. And we'll push to the root directory. So this is just going to send us back home. And that's it. So pretty straightforward, nothing crazy here. Let's continue on. And here we're going to do a return. And let's do open and close. Let's do form tags inside of those. Our form is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to do on submit, and we've done all the legwork now. We're going to do handle submit that we already created. Our method equals post. And our class name, just a few styles here. We're going to equal flex call. Let's save this just so it formats. And that's my prettier extension that helps me do that. Flex call, gap 3. Let's do a width of a half. Let's do inside of this, let's do h1. Let's say create new user. Then below that, we can start creating our inputs. Don't worry, they're going to be very short. Let's do a label. And that label is going to be full name. Then we'll have an input. Let's say input, our ID equals name. Our name equals name. On change equals handle change, like so. Let's make it required equals true. Add another, my closing tags there, and then I also need a value which equals form data dot name. Saving that so it formats. Beautiful. And last but not least, let's do a class name, and we're going to copy this. So M2 BG of Slate 400 rounded. Watched any of my videos, I'm not very good at styling, so I just round corners like crazy. So I'm going to copy the label and the input, paste it below. This one is going to be our email. So let's do email for an ID, email for the name. Change the form data.email here as well. Everything else looks good, so that should be good to go. Let's copy all of it again. Paste it below. Let's do password, ID of password, email, form data. And this actually has a type of password. Let's add that in. These probably should have a type as well. Let's do a type equal to text for our email. And also for our name. Okay, that should be good to go there. The last piece is our submit button. So let's do input. The type equals submit. The value will equal create user. And the class name, let's style this just a tiny bit. Blue 300 with a hover of BG blue 100. Self-closing tags, so we'll do slash like that. slide over so you can see again. So we got our input button in the form. We got the form. You might have wondered why I wrapped these all in closing tags. Remember, the whole return has to be wrapped in some sort of tags, and I'm actually going to do something below the form here. So that's why I did that. Let's do p tags. And then inside of here, let's just print out our error message. Now this will print out a blank string when there is no error, but that's not a big deal to me. So we're going to leave that there. And then we'll change it to text red 500. This looks good. I think we're pretty good there. Should have closed out of that terminal a long time ago. We got our user form created. Let's create the API. So inside this API directory, you see we have API, auth, and then NextAuth inside of API. So I'm going to right click on API. I'm going to create a new folder. And inside this new folder, I'm going to call it users. And inside of that user folder, I'm going to create a new file called route.js. Now we're only going to do one function in here just to show you how a post would work. I'm going to pull in next response from next server. I'm going to use our user model. So I'm going to pull that in as well. You can see how it does it up here with the @ symbol. Tab that. Now we got our user model. And then finally, we have to do a encrypt before we store it. So we want to do import bcrypt from bcrypt. Now remember this, we're not validating an email. So in my mind, this is like I run a company and I'm inputting a user that I know has access to that email address and that sort of thing. You wouldn't want to do this in like a SaaS application without validating the email address, because someone could steal someone's email address that they don't have access to. So let's export async function post, and we're going to get a request. Let's do this all in a try catch. And for our catch, let's console.log our error. That might help us if we make a mistake. I'm sure we won't. Let's return next response.json. In here, we're going to use that message. So we're going to use message and then error. Let's also return the error. That looks good. Got a comma here, another set of curly brackets. Let's also do a status of 500 if something goes wrong. Okay, that looks good. Now our try block. We're going to grab our body, so we're going to const body equals await request.json. So we're going to pull off the information. We're going to do const user data equals body.form data. Let's confirm that our data exists, the fields that we need. So we want to say if we do not have user data.email, or if we do not have user data.password, so if we don't have those fields, we are going to return a message. So we want to copy this, we'll paste it in here. We're going to say a status of 400, and then our message can be, let's not send the error. Our message can be all fields are required. So this shouldn't happen because we're sending it with that one form, but if down the road you change something, now you'll know if you're getting information, missing information. So let's check for duplicate emails now. So let's do a const, we'll call it duplicate equals await. We're going to use our model from above. So user find one. So we're going to see if we can find any email that has our user data dot email. Do dot lean and dot execute. Now we can check. So if there is a duplicate, then we want to send another response. And we're doing kind of meaningful responses here too, right? So that's kind of a cool setup that we have going. We can do a status of 409, and we can do duplicate email. Now, it's probably worth noting here that you might want to be careful and make sure that you're using, that you're checking all your emails case insensitive. So you might want to lowercase all of them before you add them to the database or something like that. Because right now you could have unique emails that just have capitalization differences or whatever it might be. So keep that in mind. Close this. That looks better. So now for here, we know we don't have a duplicate user. We know we have all the fields we need. Let's create our hash password equals await bcrypt dot hash. And then we're going to pass in user data dot password. You can do as many salt rounds as you want. I always see 10, so you probably shouldn't use 10, but that's what we'll use. Const. And then user data dot password. So now I'm overriding the plain text password with our new hash password here. So now our user data contains our hash password. We shouldn't be saving plain text passwords, and we can await user.create, and we can pass in our user data. Dang. It was longer than what I thought, but we got her done. So we created the user data. Let's copy a response. We still want to send a response. Our message, delete this, can be user created. And our status can probably be 201. Awesome. So this should be all we need to create a user. So let's go ahead. We've done a lot. Let's go ahead and test that. Make sure a user gets created successfully, and then we can try and authenticate with that user after we add the credential provider, which we haven't done either. So npm run dev. Okay, so we got our website here. I got to see who I'm logged in as. I am logged in as an admin. So if you've added this authentication and it's role-based, you have to have admin now to go to create user. If you haven't done this, you can assign admin to someone else. I'm going to go to create user. This is only admins, duh, because I didn't update that. So back on our create user page, instead of only admins, let's render our user form. See, it did the import for me. Self-closing tags. That is pretty. Who says I can't style? Okay, so let's create a new user. Bobby. bob@bob.com. Password, test, of course. And create user. Kind of looks like it worked. Google does not like my password. It's been used in a security breach, so that's worth noting. But it looks like it worked okay. So let's go back to our database, and I will click on database. Now, we didn't name our collection, so it's probably going to give a test collection, which is fine. Oh, no, we did. AppDB, we have a user. You can see we do have a user now. Awesome. So we have Bobby, bob@bob.com, and a nice hashed password. So one step left here. We have to be able to authenticate with Bobby now. So let's log out. We don't have a credential provider at all, so we can't log in with a username and password. Let's change that. So we're going to open up options. Let's go ahead. I'm going to shut down this terminal just because I'll forget it's running and then we'll be on the wrong thing. I'll close out all these just for you guys. So below our Google provider, let's do a credentials provider. Yeah, let's do a manual import though. Let's copy this one. Delete off the Google. Let's do credentials provider. Just being careful so I spell things correctly. Can cause some weird errors. And then this isn't Google. This is credentials with a lowercase c. Okay, so now we should have a credentials provider to use. Down here, let's use that credentials provider. Let's do parentheses and then curly brackets. So inside of here, we need to first tell our credentials provider what they're going to use to log in. So let's call it credentials. Then let's set our credentials equal to, they're going to enter an email. Could be a username, could be whatever you want. Label's going to be, this is just like filling out the form, honestly. They're just going to generate it for us. So we can label it email. We can say the type is text. And the placeholder is your email. Put a comma below that. I'm going to copy this. Change this to password. And we'll say we want it password and then your password. And the type, I bet we can put password here too. Let's try that. So we got a form that it's going to create when we try to log in with credentials provider of email and password. And then we have to explicitly tell it how we're going to authenticate. So we could say async authorize. You're going to get credentials, and then we'll do curly brackets. Okay, the one thing that I recommend here right away is when you're creating your authentication, put it in a try-catch block, because if you don't, NextAuth is going to spit you out a generic error on the login form that would be meant for the end user. We don't want that. So at the end of this, if we don't return a user, if at no point in this try-catch are we successful, at the very end, we want to return null, which means they're not going to be authenticated. And then inside of here, inside of the error, let's just do console.log, and then we'll do error for that one. So now we should get an error if we mess up while we're creating it right now, that sort of thing. So what we can do is then we can use const found user. So the first thing we need to do is, based on the email someone tries to log in with, we need to see if it exists. So we're going to do user, which we're going to import. So I'm going to tab, and it's going to do the import at the top. You see we got our model. So we're going to await user.find1. We're going to pass in email, or we're going to look for an email that is from credentials.email. Same as before, we can do .lean.exe like that. So this should find the user. Now, if it doesn't, so if we have a found user, we can move on to the next step. If it doesn't find a user, it's going to go down to this return null, and we're going to just give that error that the credentials are incorrect. We don't want to give too much information. You know, we don't want to say, oh, we couldn't find that email address or whatever. So we're just going to say that the credentials provided were not valid, regardless of if it's a bad email, bad password, whatever. So inside of found user, then for your sake, our sake, we can say the user exists. You want to remove this after you're done testing. We'll do const match. So now we're going to test to see if we have a good password. So let's bcrypt. Remember, it's an encrypted password, and they're obviously going to type the plain text one. So we'll do bcrypt.compare. We're going to compare credentials.password to the found user.password. It looks something like this, bcrypt.compare. So this is going to use our salt and compare it. We need to import that as well. So we're going to import bcrypt from bcrypt. We're real close now, guys. So if we have a match, so if our passwords do match, then we can console.log good pass. Again, this is just for us. Remove it after you're done. And I also want to delete from our found user the password. We don't really need that anymore, so I'm not even going to keep it around. And then we can give our found user a role, just like everyone else. And this equals, just a reminder, I know I've overstated this, but this is an unverified email user. And then only if all that's successful, we return our found user. That should be it, guys. So that looks pretty good. Let's open up our terminal. npm run dev. That looks good. Remember, I'm not logged in right now, and I don't want to be because I'm just going to test my credentials. Let's hope I can remember this. So it's bob@bob.com, lowercase, and then test, lowercase. Sign in with credentials. You see it looks like it's good. So if I go to client member, you can see bob@bob.com, unverified email, and then create user. It's denied. I'm not an admin, so that makes sense. Awesome. This looks great. This is functioning. Let me know if anything's missing from this video in the comments, and I'll certainly make a follow-up adjusting and giving you whatever you would like to see. Remember, inside this authentication, you can do whatever you want. So you could even hard code these users somewhere if you wanted to give out secret passwords to your application or whatever it is. Be careful, play around, see what it's like before you go a full production app. Let me know in the comments any other videos you want, programming, applications, anything you want to see that you haven't seen around. Let me know, I'll create it. If you haven't been to the website, check it out. We have a Cyborg blog as well. It has posts that are half human, half me. We're creating articles, doing reviews. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep coding.